With Christmas just 10 days away, you may be wondering, will you wake up to a beautiful blanket of Christmas snow, or will the grass be green like many years it has been? Meteorologist John Birchfield here with this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter. And this week, we're getting you ready for the Christmas holiday. Oftentimes in the Christmas movies, you see that beautiful snow falling by the lampposts. And even though it's portrayed like that in the movies, is that an accurate description of Christmas in Toledo, Northwest Ohio, and Southeastern Michigan? We're going to answer those questions and break down the data on white Christmas chances and what you can expect this year. If you're not already subscribed, head to WTOL.com/email, and you can watch the latest on WTOL 11 Plus and on YouTube. So let's dig into the data and get into the graphics here with our white Christmas chances and what you can expect for this year. Well, as you've probably seen with that WTOL 11 10-day forecast, white Christmas chances this year are looking very sparse, trending down, and it's looking like a very slim to zero probability that we see any snowfall on Christmas this year. Of course, there's still a very small chance, and we'll keep you updated as the Christmas holiday draws closer. So what's normal here in Toledo and Northwest Ohio and Southeastern Michigan? Well, white Christmases, they're not guaranteed here in the Midwest. In fact, more Christmases come without snow than with snow. Just about 1 in 3 Christmases features any snowfall on the ground, or about 31%. And if you want a guaranteed white Christmas, you have to go out towards the mountainous areas of the Rockies and the northwestern United States. Those white colors on this map show you where white Christmas chances are just about 100%. Now, south of the Ohio River, there is essentially zero chance of any white Christmas. What about the Great Lakes region? For most of the areas of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the further north you go, the greater the odds of a white Christmas. And same goes for New England. The further north and the further east, the higher the probability of a Christmas snow. So let's talk December before we get into white Christmas, because we've been updating you on the Climate Friday newsletter about how December has featured a very quiet weather pattern devoid of any snowfall accumulation. So far, we've seen a few flakes, just a trace of snowfall so far this December. Rainfall's been a little bit closer to normal with just shy of 1 inch. The official rain gauge at Toledo Express has shown 0.83 inches of rainfall. Still below normal, but at least closer to the climatological average than our snowfall. So far this December, just a trace of snowfall. And if we were to end the month without any measurable snowfall, with just a trace, it would go down in the record books as tied for the least snowy 2015, 2014, and 1931. That trio of Decembers each brought just a trace of accumulation, and that is the direction that we are trending in. Overall, when we look at the data towards the long-term forecast, we're seeing a weather pattern that is going to feature largely dry and mild conditions through the middle to latter half of December. And that means in the 10-day forecast, you'll see lots of days in the 40s, slightly above average, and little to no snowfall. This is a weather pattern that is likely to continue for the next 10 days to 2 weeks. So now that we covered December, let's talk Christmas in particular. What's normal? And we'll also go over some extremes or snowy and cold Christmases of the past. Our average low temperature, so that's what you wake up to early first thing Christmas morning, that is 20 degrees. No surprise there. It is cold and below freezing. The average high temperature, that is 34 degrees. So Christmas typically features temperatures that are above the freezing mark. That's not to say we can't get snow, because snow does occur with temperatures in the mid-30s. The snowiest Christmas on record, that goes back well over a century, 1909. Boy, that Christmas brought 10.8 inches of snow accumulation. And I'm sure your parents or grandparents may have stories of that Christmas. Looking at Christmas rainfall, this is a trend that has become a bit more common in recent years, although we still did have some rainy Christmases back in the middle of the 20th century. 1945 takes the cake, bringing almost 1 inch of rainfall on Christmas. I know snow lovers, that is not the sight you want to see out your window when you wake up. Many folks would rather see a white Christmas as opposed to a wet Christmas. We'll talk about the link between climate change and Christmas weather in a bit, but in general, what we've seen is an uptick in precipitation of the liquid variety and slightly less in terms of Christmas snow. So when was the last time we got a decent snowfall on Christmas? Well, we have to go back to 2020. Of course, that pandemic snowfall was a nice treat for snow lovers. December 25th of 2020 brought us a nice, even, round number, 1 inch of snowfall. And technically speaking, 1 inch is what is required to be called a white Christmas, typically because 1 inch is about what usually covers up the grass, whereas if you just see a dusting, you can still see the grass poking on through. The last time we got over 1 inch, well, we have to go back almost 20 years in the record books for that one. Christmas of 2005, that year on December 25th, we saw 1.1 inches of accumulation. So those numbers show you that Christmas snow that is measurable and over 1 inch is very rare. If it's been almost 20 years since we've seen over 1 inch of Christmas accumulation, it goes to show that Christmas snow is not a guarantee in the Midwest. All right, snow lovers, this one is for you. What about the snowiest Christmases on record? We already talked about 1909. That's the only one that's brought us double-digit snowfall totals, 10.8 inches of accumulation. Mid-century, 1951, we saw 9.6 inches of accumulation, and then the numbers start to go downhill quite quickly. December 25th of 1915 brought a nice even half a foot. 1944, 5.5 inches, and 1935, 4.1 inches of accumulation. Now, one thing you may notice looking at these years is they all occurred quite a while ago. With the exception of 1951, all of those happened in the first half of the 20th century, and even 1951 goes to show that it's been a good 75 plus years since many of these very snowy Christmases. Of course, that is just correlational data, but it does give you an idea that Christmas snow perhaps is becoming a little bit less commonplace. Now, if you look at a list of the recent Christmas snows, well, this is a bit dismal for snow lovers. 2022, just a trace. 2021, nothing, nada, not even a flake. 2020, we saw 1 inch of accumulation. That was a nice treat for Christmas lovers. And 2018 and 2019, each of those Christmases, no accumulation to be seen. So in other words, in the last 5, we've only seen one with measurable accumulation and another one with just a trace. And that goes to show the rarity of a Christmas snow, even though the movies may paint a picture of some beautiful big snowflakes flying by the street lampposts. So what does the overall picture of data show us? Well, there have been weather observations collected in the Toledo area since the late 1800s. We have data dating back to the 1870s, and we have specific snowfall data going back to the 1890s. So it's a pretty big data set, and we can look at this as a snapshot of Christmases of the past. Overall, most Christmases feature 0 snowfall. Even though the movies like to feature that snow, well, we don't see it quite as often as you might think. 54 Christmases with no snow, 30 Christmases with just a trace of accumulation. So that would be just a dusting or, barely enough to even cover up the grass. We've had 20 Christmases that brought between 1/10 and 4/10 of accumulation. So that's a nice bit, but still you can often see the grass poking through with that very small amount of snowfall. 9 Christmases have brought us between 1/2 inch and 9/10 of an inch. And even though that amount of snowfall might be a nice treat to wake up to Christmas morning, it doesn't technically meet the definition of a white Christmas. That requires 1 inch of Christmas snow. We've seen only 7 Christmases between that ballpark of 1 inch and 3 inches of accumulation. And in rare territory, those Christmases with 3 or more inches of snowfall, those ones are quite hard to come by. We have seen 6 Christmases that brought us 3 or more inches of snowfall. So when you look at those numbers tallied up, just 13 over 1 inch, and that is precisely why that white Christmas is so elusive, and the vast majority of these Christmases just bringing us a trace, if not 0 snowfall whatsoever. And that is something that we've seen looking at the data all the way back to the late 1800s. Now, part of that has to do with climate change, and simply the fact that we are getting warmer makes snowfall a little bit harder to come by. A lot of the winter precipitation that we are seeing is becoming a little more common of the liquid variety. In other words, rainfall getting more commonplace, and Christmas snow, that is something that's becoming a little bit more elusive and rare. December as a whole has gotten considerably warmer. Even though the entire calendar year has warmed up and increased due to global warming, December is the month that has been affected the most. In the past decade alone, the data shows us that there has been a 3.1 degree uptick in December temperatures, and that is in the Toledo area, but it's a trend that has been experienced nationwide. Of all 12 months, December is the one that has warmed up the most. Now, data also looking back at the 12 days of Christmas. That's kind of a fun little way of looking at things related to the Christmas song, but there is also scientific data behind it. In other words, the 12 days, or roughly 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, we have seen a big big time warming trend since the late 60s and the early 70s. We typically averaged around 23 degrees for the mean temperature, and we've seen a nice uptick in those temperatures. In fact, some data shows as much as 7 or 8 degrees of warming in those last 30 to 40 years since then. However, there is still year-to-year variation. Sometimes we do have those warmer 12 days of Christmas leading up to the Christmas holiday, and sometimes we do have below that trend as well. So overall, it is a nice gentle upward trend, but that's not to say that it's impossible to get cold and snowy Christmas weather. So with regards to temperatures, this one's a little bit more erratic. Even though Christmas snow in general is becoming a little bit less commonplace, the temperatures can be up and down, and part of that has to do with the jet stream. It has to do with the individual weather pattern that we are under. Boy, there's been a wild card of Christmas weather in terms of the temperatures these last few years. You may remember last year, 2022, that was a very cold one. We saw those wind chills and harsh temperatures, and the warmest the mercury got that entire year was just 15 degrees. It felt even colder with the wind. Now, the year prior was the total opposite. 58 degrees, a balmy Christmas. That was quite a warm one. 2020, we talked about how that year brought 1 inch of Christmas snow. It was also on the cooler side in terms of temperatures at 24 degrees, with those highs not even reaching the freezing mark. 2019, ironically, that one also hit 58 degrees. It was a very mild Christmas, both of those feeling more like spring days than winter ones, with those temperatures in the upper 50s. And last but not least, 2018, that was a more seasonable and typical Christmas, featuring a high temperature of 39 degrees. So overall, Christmas extremes, the warmest and the coldest that we have ever seen on record. If you go back to 1982, that was the mildest Christmas that we've ever experienced, at least as far as the weather records go back. 63 degrees on Christmas Day, certainly feeling more like a spring day. And the coldest, interestingly enough, this occurred just a year later, Christmas of 1983. That one featured a temperature of 13 degrees below zero. So isn't it interesting that just 1 year apart, those Christmases brought us the warmest and the coldest? Keep in mind, December only averages 6.5 inches of snow. In general, it's just a warm up for what's to come for the remainder of the winter. January typically brings us a little over a foot of snow as the snowiest month, and February is the second snowiest month on average, bringing us about 10 inches of accumulation. We are likely to end up well below normal in the snowfall department this December, and especially with the way things are going, we've only picked up a trace of snowfall. We are tied with 3 other years as the least snowy December on record. So we're going to end up below that 6.5, but that's not to say it's impossible to get a Christmas snow. Now, as we draw closer to the Christmas holiday, just 10 days away if you're watching this on Friday, and it'll be in the 10-day forecast. We'll keep you updated on air and online. If you're not already subscribed to that Climate Friday newsletter, head to WTOL.com/email for the very latest as December unfolds.